There is a moment in human history that almost nobody talks about. Not a war, not a conquest, not a plague. Something quieter than all of those and more permanent. A single invention that didn't just change how humans fought, it changed how humans thought, how they organized, how they treated each other. And in doing so, it ended a way of life that had lasted for almost the entirety of human existence. The real answer to what that invention did is far stranger than any battlefield story you've ever heard. Here is what you need to understand first. For the overwhelming majority of human history, your ancestors lived in a world of radical equality, not equality in the modern political sense, something more visceral than that, a physical equality enforced by biology itself. In a world of hand-to-hand conflict, size mattered, strength mattered. The biggest, most physically powerful individuals in a group held a natural advantage that no amount of social negotiation could fully erase. But here is the strange thing that anthropologists have discovered about actual hunter-gatherer societies. They were not dominated by the strongest. Researcher Christopher Boehm spent decades studying hundreds of hunter-gatherer groups across multiple continents, and what he found in his landmark work on hierarchy and human evolution was striking. These groups were fiercely, almost obsessively egalitarian. Any individual who tried to dominate, to accumulate more resources than their share, to position themselves above others, was systematically pushed back down. Through mockery, through ostracism, through collective action. Boehm called this a reverse dominance hierarchy. Instead of the strong dominating the weak, the group collectively dominated anyone who tried to become too strong. And it worked. For hundreds of thousands of years, it worked. So what held this system in place? What was the enforcement mechanism that kept even the largest, most physically powerful individuals in check? The answer, according to Boehm and other researchers, was the ever-present threat of collective lethal action. In simple terms, if you pushed too hard, the group could simply decide to kill you. And in a world of only hand-to-hand weapons, that threat was credible regardless of your size. One person, even a physically dominant one, could not fight an entire coalition of determined individuals armed with the same basic tools. The playing field stayed roughly level. Now pick up a bow. The bow and arrow, developed somewhere between 60,000 and 30,000 years ago, is often discussed in terms of its hunting utility. And yes, it transformed the food supply. But researchers studying its social impact argue it did something far more consequential to human society. It created, for the first time, a truly reliable long-range killing tool that could be used by one individual against another from a distance that physical strength could not bridge. Anthropologist Peter Turchin, who studies the mathematical patterns of historical social change, notes that the introduction of projectile weapons fundamentally altered the calculus of collective lethal action. The threat that had kept would-be dominators in check for hundreds of thousands of years became simultaneously more available to everyone and more difficult to coordinate. A single skilled archer with enough arrows could resist a coalition, could pick off members of a group one by one, could hold ground in a way that no individual with a hand axe ever could. The enforcer of equality had become a tool of inequality. But this is where the story gets truly strange, because the bow did not immediately produce tyrants. That took another ingredient. That took something the bow alone could not provide. It took surplus. Anthropologist James Scott, in his research on the origins of states and hierarchical civilization, argues that the critical transition was not the weapon itself, but the combination of the weapon with settled agriculture. When humans began farming roughly 10,000 years ago, they created something that had never meaningfully existed before in the human world: storable, concentrated wealth, grain that could be taxed, fields that could be controlled, resources that could be accumulated by one person or one family across multiple generations in a way that a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle made structurally impossible. Before agriculture, if you accumulated more than you could carry, it was a burden, not an advantage. The group's mobility meant that wealth had a natural ceiling. After agriculture, that ceiling lifted, and the weapon was there, waiting to enforce the new order. This is the combination that ended the old world. Not the bow alone, not farming alone, but the bow in the hands of someone who now had something worth protecting, something worth taking, something worth killing for across generations. Researcher Walter Scheidel, who spent years studying inequality across civilizations in his book The Great Leveler, found that the rise of organized states almost universally produced steep increases in inequality. The egalitarian baseline that had characterized human life for hundreds of thousands of years collapsed with remarkable speed once the conditions for its collapse were in place. Within a few thousand years of the agricultural transition, societies that had maintained flat social structures for almost all of human existence had reorganized into pyramids: kings, priests, warriors, slaves. The social technology that Boehm's research showed had kept human groups roughly equal for hundreds of millennia, proved fragile against the combination of lethal range weapons and storable surplus. Now here is the part that reaches across all of that history and lands directly on your life. You are descended from people who lived in the egalitarian world. Your body, your nervous system, your deepest social instincts were shaped by hundreds of thousands of years in communities where radical equality was not an aspiration, but an enforced reality, where anyone who tried to elevate themselves too far above the group faced immediate collective pushback, where status had to be earned continuously, could not be inherited, and was always contingent on the approval of everyone around you. The hierarchies you navigate every day, the boss above you and the subordinates below. The social media follower counts that place some voices far above others. The inherited wealth that determines what world a child is born into. These are not ancient features of human life. They are historically recent, shockingly recent in the context of how long humans have existed. Your discomfort with hierarchy is not weakness. It is memory. Your sense of injustice when one person takes far more than their share is not naivety. It is the deepest social instinct your species possesses, honed by hundreds of thousands of years of collective enforcement. Boehm's research suggests that the egalitarian impulse is not a modern political invention. It is the baseline from which all human civilization has been a deviation. The weapon didn't just change warfare. It changed what was possible to want. It changed what was possible to keep. And in doing so, it changed what humans became to each other. Not all at once. Not through any single battle, but through the slow logic of a new reality, accumulating over centuries, reshaping the social world so completely that the old one became almost impossible to imagine. Almost, because something in you still imagines it. Every time you feel the pull toward fairness in a situation that doesn't require it. Every time you feel disproportionate anger at someone taking more than their share. Every time the distance between one person's life and another's strikes you as wrong in a way you can't quite explain rationally. That feeling has a name. It has an origin. It goes back further than any civilization currently standing. It goes back to the world before the weapon changed everything. The world your nervous system still, in some quiet part of itself, believes it is living in. And somewhere in understanding that, you might find the beginning of an answer to the question that no political system has yet fully solved. Not because the answer is simple, but because the question itself is ancient, older than nations, older than kings, older than the arrow that flew across the clearing and changed what human beings were capable of doing to each other. The old world didn't die in a war. It died in the logic of a single, elegant tool. And we have been living in the aftermath ever since.